I'm going to introduce my colleagues, and I will have a short interview of Amy, and she will jump in and tell you more about the topic of the day. And feel free, Kristen, I guess, to ask questions during. We're not going to hold them to the end. This is a conversation. So we want it to be interactive, and that's why we're offering this webinar. Okay, let's get going. I'm going to introduce, first, I know that Amy's bio was in the invitation, so you know about her formal title, but what that means is she is a very senior faculty member in our organizational behavior group, and her research and interests focus on how people make meaning of their work in difficult contexts, as in stigmatized occupations, virtual work, and in unemployment. And so she also has a deep research, unique research in the area of work as a job, career, or a calling, with her job crafting topics that you can read more about if you Google that. And her current research is on how employees shape their interactions and in their interactions and relationships with others in the workplace to change both their work identity and the meaning of a job, the job crafting topic that I just mentioned. She teaches in many of our executive education programs, a lot of the leadership programs, because of her expertise in organizational behavior. So in our custom programs, in our open enrollment programs, in women's leadership, and she was co-faculty director of a very popular online program fostering inclusion and diversity. So she has very deep expertise in the teams and the DEI area as well. My colleague, Kristen Sorek West, and I have worked together for a number of years, and before she came to Yale, she was in the corporate environment. She was at Starbucks and a few other corporate side companies, but has spent her entire career in marketing roles. And I really deeply appreciate her role in organizing us to do this webinar. And I am Senior Director of Learning Partnerships, and I am often the first point of contact for you all as you learn about Yale, or maybe want to move ahead with an open enrollment or a custom program. So I know some of you in the audience today, and I appreciate that you have signed up and dialed in. And so let's get going. I'm going to pose a question of Amy and then kind of let her take it away with all of her expertise in this area. But first, I just wanted to ask you, Amy, for the Yale Leadership Framework, what was the problem that you set out to solve when you took a deep dive into the research and how you would organize this?
Well, thanks so much, Lisa, for the really kind introduction, and for the great question. And hi to all of you who are out there who've joined us today or are watching this later. I'm thrilled to be talking about this topic because it's, I think, really important, and we're really excited here as a faculty and as a school about what it is that we've put together around the Yale Leadership Framework. So the problem, to your question, Lisa, the problem we were trying to solve with this was one where over time, and I think this happens in many places, as we were putting together teaching offerings in the space of leadership writ large, we started to teach so many things and have so many wonderful colleagues who have particular areas of expertise that we started to see a real opportunity to organize those offerings for a few reasons. So one, it would help enrollees, it would help organizations and companies that we partner with to take a much more targeted and strategic approach to how it is they want to build out the leadership development of the people who they're sending to our programs. It would enable our faculty to really drill down into their areas of expertise and to build out over the period of a week, of a semester, of whatever length of the program might have, a more systematic approach to the topics that they're covering. So it was a way to both organize what was out there in a way that was very much aligned with the identity of the school, while also energizing and tapping into the deep expertise of more of our faculty in a way that felt more programmatic and systematic than, say, scattershot or like a menu of sorts.
Okay, thank you. So I think we should get into the meat of the framework, but before that, just a reminder, and you saw this you all in the audience saw this in the invitation. It is the webinar is really to help you with your planning for next year, 2023, and it's to help you reframing what Amy just shared. Actually figure out how to get more return on investment for what you're getting with your investment in Yale programs. All of the expertise that Amy says she's having focused in this framework and organized in this framework. So without further ado, Amy, can you tell us what you landed on in the framework? And so how did you make sense of all of this? And talk about the levels and the pillars and how you structured it.
Happy to. You know, before I do that, I'll just say a little bit more about, you know, what the process was that we went through here. So in our organizational behavior group, among all of the faculty who work with the programs at Yale, we began to systematize and talk with our faculty, not just about the sessions that they teach in our programs that go very well with our clients and with the learners who come here, either online or live, but also engaged in a process of talking with the faculty about what if they could dig deeper into the kinds of things that they teach, what kinds of sessions would they love to develop and be able to offer that could carry out particular themes in even deeper ways. And that was a very energizing process for our faculty because it evoked all kinds of responses, kind of build outs in new directions. And that became the core of how we started to think about the framework itself that you just referenced. And so I'm going to share my screen just to pull up some slides to sort of guide our conversation around this a bit. And so you should be at this point seeing my screen share. And so when we think about the leadership framework and where it is that we've taken that, you know, in some sense, you know, it answers a basic question, which I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on around, you know, well, does good leadership matter? And what is the evidence for this? We believe very strongly here at a school that is dedicated to educating leaders for business and society, that leadership is something that can be developed, it can be taught, it can be sharpened and deepened, regardless of the level of the leader. We teach CEOs, we teach heads of state, we teach people who are just starting out in their management and leadership journeys in their careers. And we believe strongly that good leadership does matter and that this is something that we can develop carefully in conjunction with the people we have the opportunity and the privilege of teaching. And so I'll say a little bit about how, you know, how I come to that, right? So one of the key insights here, it's the number one insight that I want to share is, you know, being good is not the same as being great. And, you know, what organizations need, and we certainly have seen this in the last couple of years, are for their leaders to be great. And the evidence suggests that there are benefits to that that are perhaps hard to overstate. So if we look here along the x-axis, you see percentiles of leadership effectiveness, sort of, you know, where people are scoring in that, and then what the employee engagement percentile looks like on the y-axis. And what you'll notice is, you know, poor leaders end up or poor leadership ends up creating a great deal of dissatisfaction. Many of us have heard the phrase or the saying that people don't quit organizations, they quit bosses and managers, and there's certainly data to bear that out. As we move up the scale, you know, good leadership good leaders have a nice impact, an adequate impact. They help certainly more than they hurt. But when we have the opportunity to help people understand how to develop their leadership in a way that can make them truly excellent in some of the elements of their leadership, we know that they're in a position to make an even greater difference from the point of view of how engaged people feel, how committed they feel to the organization, their likelihood of staying with the organization. I think we've all seen over the course of the unfolding pandemic just how much it matters for people to feel as though they are committed to the leaders and the managers who are guiding them. One more sort of graph, by way of, again, sort of evidence here. If we look at, in this case, over 30,000 leaders across a number of industries, looking at overall leadership effectiveness along the bottom, you see the impact on employees willing to go the extra mile for the organization rising accordingly. So again, we respond to good leadership. We think, perhaps that we often think that people respond to jobs that they love, things that, they have an opportunity to do that bring out their best. And that's certainly true. But who it is that is guiding those efforts and leading those efforts and inspiring the people in the organization matters a great deal. And so in developing the leadership framework, we've talked a little bit about that up to this point. We became very interested in two things. So one, thinking about what are the appropriate areas of focus here in terms of what is it that we're trying to help people to learn about and to learn how to do. So, again, we care very much that people come in and get a strong sort of knowledge and research base for the kinds of things that we're teaching. But we also recognize that that's not going to deliver on its potential unless people are able to put into practice skills and tools that are based on the research and the cutting edge knowledge that we're bringing to the fore here in our programs. And so when we thought about the kinds of areas where we felt we could have the most impact, there are three major pillars of this. So the first is, how do we help people learn more about how they can inspire others through their leadership? So this speaks to things, as we're right at the top of the why here, this speaks to things like, how do we help people come to understand as leaders how their values align with their leadership, how their values align with the mission of the organization. How can they think about ways of leveraging the mission of the organization and of the work that people do in ways that can really help drive motivation, engagement, development of their leadership and of their people. I'll move from around in clockwise fashion. Another sort of piece of this that we think is really critical has to do with how do leaders help organizations with aligning the kinds of things that must be working together seamlessly to accomplish great results. So whether that's alignment of people across teams, within teams, across divisions of the organization, how do we align structurally in ways that help the organization to deliver on its promise? How do we align systems and standards in ways that can help really multiply the impact of leadership in the organization is the other sort of piece of this. And then finally, we realized with the depth of expertise, research expertise, and so on that we have here around topics such as social network analysis and so on, how do we think about ways of getting people to think of connecting themselves to, again, sort of their own values and reasons for being leaders? How do we help people connect with others in more meaningful ways to create, say, team experiences and organizational experiences that are truly inclusive, so we can move past what is often a challenge for organizations, which is by embracing diversity, we certainly are helping to support many organizations' goals, but how do you manage and lead an organization inclusively so that people feel connected to their colleagues, they feel connected to the organization and to the work that they're doing? And how do we help organizations and leaders think about the connection between their work and their organizations and the world? What is the kind of opportunity for partnership and for impact that can, again, sort of elevate people's leadership, particularly as they move through their career? So these are the three main pillars of our framework. And you'll notice along the bottom that you see these 4 different levels that we attend to as we build out the kinds of offerings that we have in these spaces. So, for example, we look at how these 3 different topics work at the level of the individual. So I'll give you an example. If we think about alignment at the individual level, one of the course sessions that we teach has to do with how do people redesign and craft their jobs in ways that enable alignment between their values, their talents, the things they care about most, and what it is that the organization most needs from them. We also pay attention to the team level. So, for example, how do we manage, lead, and guide teams in ways that brings out the best in them, and that enables teams to feel like a really positive source of connection for people in the organization. So, I'll just give an example here. One of the sessions that we teach that would fall at the team level and within the connect category has to do with how do you structure decision making in teams in ways that enable people to leverage their connections with each other to come to more effective outcomes, and to come to outcomes where their ability to manage conflict yields productive results as opposed to difficult dynamics that have to be managed going forward. And then next you see down at the bottom of the model, we move to the level of the organization. So again, sort of building out from the level of the individual, the team, now thinking about the whole organization. How do we think about the ways in which leadership looks effective at that level? And again, I'll give by way of example, one of the sessions that we teach has to do with leading mission-driven organizations and the special opportunities and challenges that come with that. And that's something that would fit squarely within the Inspire part of the graphic that you see at the center of the screen. And then finally, we pay attention to leadership at the global level. So we want to be as expansive as possible as we think about the ways in which leadership matters and leadership shows up. And so in the space of global leadership, we have sessions on things like leading cross-culturally in ways that are effective, which again sort of would tap the connect part of the framework there. And so that's just by way of introduction and giving a few examples, the way in which we organized a number of sessions. So I think it's something like beyond 50 sessions at this point that we offer that cross these different levels and cross these different areas of focus. And the idea is this kind of organization would help learners, would help talent managers, corporate partners be really strategic and thoughtful about where are their greatest opportunities in terms of focusing the talent that they're having attend the programs or come to our programs in ways that are likely to yield better and more targeted results than simply having people come and do more of a greatest hits. They're getting some sessions in leadership, but it's not as strategic as, say, drilling down in areas of need or areas of opportunity in the eyes of the talent manager or of the organization more generally. And Lisa, you had mentioned before the question of how do we think about this from a competency perspective. Again, I've given some examples here, and this is my final slide under Inspire, Connect, and Align. What are the kinds of competencies that we're trying to develop through our sessions? We also use tools that gather data from leaders in our programs and from the people who work closely with those leaders from their organizations that can give us really effective data on where they're starting from, but also where it is they're able to develop to following our programs that we make available if those are appropriate for the people who are enrolling in our programs. And so, rather than go through all of these bullets, I'll just leave those here for a bit, for people to take them in. But you can see a lot of our work in the DE&I space that Lisa had mentioned earlier falls under the center column there. How do we help people build relationships, develop others, promote teamwork, and do so in a way that engages and retains and builds out the careers of people who perhaps have not had as much of a history in that organization or in that industry, but are beginning to enter it in greater numbers as organizations pay more attention to fostering diversity and inclusion in their ranks. Around Inspire, you can see already over on the left there, lots of the kinds of capabilities and skills that we work on here to really help people identify areas of aligned inspiration, but then also practice with some tools so that they can be more effective in how they're conveying that. And then finally, on the side of Align, all the way over on the right, you see a number of things that, again, are hallmarks of managers and leaders who understand the ways in which people, systems, and structures must be brought into alignment in order to enable the organization to be as effective as it can possibly be. And so, this just gives some examples, but again, in the build out of the sessions that we've created, it creates, I think, a really powerful platform on which to think about and begin to choose what makes sense for the organization and its current opportunities and challenges, or what makes sense or is attractive for the individual learner, depending on how a program might be chosen or put together. So Lisa, that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but I hope
it was terrific. Thank you so
much.
much, Amy. And I hope, it really is a great framework to show the different pillars and then the levels at which those pillars are taught to the individual, the team, the organization, and then at the global level. And the competencies, yes, are very helpful. So our talent management leaders in the audience, I think they got the message that going from good to great is the goal here, because it makes a very big difference. And then, the competencies that you laid out, those are the levers to pull. Those are the things that you want to include in your learning goals for your custom programs. And also, that this is Yale's approach to learning design in our open enrollment program. So I hope that helps you understand our programs. We obviously don't teach all of that in one program. There are different focuses for different programs, but the goal here in both your internal programs and our programs is to achieve this optimal leadership effectiveness, because as Amy pointed out, you take a deeper dive into this and you find out there are a lot of problems in our organizations that really keep us from being as good as we could be as organizations and leaders. Yeah, sorry, you're going to ask questions?
Yeah, actually, I got a few in the chat, so I wanted to field them here. And
thank you.
For those on the call, feel free to drop them into the chat or send them directly to me and through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, which we're probably all intimately familiar with coming out of the pandemic. Yeah, so someone actually asked, how do you begin to narrow down or prioritize which leader competencies to address first? Yeah. You have a very long list on your slides. And so what if your management team, what if your executive team has multiple areas of opportunity, let's call them, but where do you focus first? How do you prioritize them?
Great. It's a great question. And I'll, Lisa, if it's okay, I'll give my thoughts on this, but given all of your work and expertise in building programs and partnering with clients to do that, I am eager to hear what you have to say as well. From my perspective, what I would say is it really, from my standpoint, would be guided by what is the level of leader that we're talking about, right? So I had noted before that we educate people, work with people who are very junior and new in their leadership journeys, where perhaps things that are more at the individual level and maybe getting some more of the nuts and bolts around alignment and connection, kind of depending on where are their duties taking them, primarily would be a helpful guide from the point of view of choosing sessions and choosing a session build that is going to meet them where they live. You don't want to go too high level for people who feel like, I'm not trying to inspire the whole organization. I'm just trying to get my little division, to be more effective, right? Like that ends up being incredibly instructive as guidance as we think about the appropriate kinds of sessions. To your question, or to the question that you conveyed, Kristen, I would say if there are many opportunities for development, I would be guided personally by thinking about of the suite or set of opportunities, which ones seem to be more fundamental, from which growth in the others will flow or is dependent, meaning kind of what has to come first. So for example, I would say if we're thinking about doing sessions on Inspire, but there are kind of the questions of alignment and connection that are not perhaps coming together as effectively in the organization or for those leaders, I might be inclined to address those first, so that then kind of, once there's more operational effectiveness on the ground, what does it mean to kind of raise our game and think about the ways in which we can, again, sort of cement the whole thing through more inspiring leadership. So just some thoughts around that, but the question again, I think raises the important point that there's a lot here, and so being really thoughtful and careful about how it's put together is a lot of the fun that we have as we design programs. But Lisa, I want to throw it over to you because I'm curious from your perspective.
Oh, sure, I'd be happy. Thank you for asking me. Well, to answer the question, where would you start? Where I see our framework and also many of our clients starting is with the individual at that level, and maybe even before trying to help an individual develop the core skills that Amy laid out and just described, they would do some sort of self-assessment. So assessments, great place to start. Find out where you are, benchmark where you are, and try to move the needle to a higher level from there. And so a lot of our programs use assessments. You sometimes want us to use them in our custom programs to start out for leadership in particular. And then those skills, the soft skills, everybody says, that are so important. And Amy, you pointed out Inspire. So what kind of soft skills are needed to do that? Well, obviously, creating safety in a group so that people feel safe enough to share their ideas, but also to communicate. And so communication skills and persuasion skills and all, there are a ton of skills that fall into that bucket at the individual level. So I would look at it that way. And when you work with us on the custom side, we'll help you step through that if you haven't already worked it out yourselves. But thank you for asking me. I see the individual and the soft skills and the assessments as the kind of the starting point for this whole framework that you would bring to us to help us help you.
And thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Amy. Actually, I wanted to build on something that Tayo dropped into the chat about leadership coaching and mentoring. So where does an individual coaching plan or component of professional development fit into, let's say, attending a course by Yale or a program by Yale? How does coaching and mentoring fit into a professional development program?
Lisa, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. Just a brief thing. Coaching is very important, and I know we have coaches in our audience today. So you guys just really help accelerate the process, I should say. But I mentioned assessments to help debrief the assessments, to explain the research behind them, and how you take from the assessment and create something that you act on after the program in a post-program development program. So they help make sense, and then help you create maybe something custom to your own specific needs, even if it's in an open enrollment program. And we use coaching in our open enrollment programs and our custom programs, and to debrief 360s, reflective best self, decision making for leadership, for leaders, sorry. And so I would just say that. I know Amy is very deep into all of those assessments and teaches about them, but the coaches pick up where Amy and her colleagues leave off and helping us make sense of them. What about you, Amy?
I think you put it really well. I mean, I see the coaching expertise that we have here at the School of Management as, in some sense, taking the baton from us, having taught a lot of content, giving the assessment, talking through the assessment results, to begin to identify beyond what we talk about in the classroom, what are the specific experiments that people can and should start running in how it is that they're leading, that will help them to respond to what it is that they've learned from the assessments about where their greatest opportunities might be or areas that need more attention. And so I see it as taking what is already really actionable teaching and customizing it and bringing it sort of to the level of a personal plan in a way that I have seen work very effectively here, because it's extra support and extra sort of troubleshooting and planning around bringing that back into the organization and the roles that people hold.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Lisa. I was just getting some comments in and some more questions. So we're one delightful comment in the chat, and Lisa, you responded to this already. It's from James, who asked, why do we call communicating soft skills when it's core to interacting? Shouldn't we use the term essential skills?
Yes, it is. Soft skills are hard to learn.
But possible to teach.
They are. We'll say that the way we quote unquote teach them here is experiential learning. We really explain what are the best practices approach based on research, and then give people a safe place to try them out in small groups and that sort of thing. So they're soft skills, and James, yes, they're essential, and they're hardest to learn. That's why I always think start with that first. Get the hardest stuff done first.
Lisa, I'm glad you raised experiential learning. That is, we teach using a variety of methods here, but one of the cornerstones of our teaching has to do with experiential learning for the following reason, right? So, the risk of programs, that are happening in university settings is that you're just getting sort of research lectures, which could be fascinating, but they're very hard to translate into how are you going to carry that into how you're managing and leading. And so we've taken a lot of care to make sure that we're bringing that cutting edge research and knowledge to people who are here to learn, but we're doing it in a way that they understand and feel and see it viscerally. I can teach you, I could sit here all day and teach you all about what we know about the ways in which to structure team process and team decision making to leverage conflict productively and to get to much better outcomes. And I could put all of you into a deep nap by doing that. Even if I have great slides and I have, lots of interesting findings to convey. But if I have you go through an exercise where in a team you have to structure the team and its process to try to come to a set of decisions or try to execute a task. And then we look to see, where did it go really well for some of the teams? Where did it perhaps fall apart for some of the teams? Where did things go off in a very weird track? And then through the debrief of that and talking through thoroughly what happened, when, how, and why, bringing the research to bear and to talk about, this is why this happens. That's why this part went sort of so well. How do you structure that in sort of going forward? We care a lot that people can walk out of the programs and go back to their contexts and put the learning into action immediately. Otherwise, the benefit, kind of the impact of what it is that we're teaching here evaporates sort of as soon as people leave campus. And so we normalize failure here. We normalize that, you may go through one of these experiential exercises and have it be really challenging and not go very well, which we celebrate, because that's where learning is maximized. You're here to learn. It's a safe kind of laboratory environment almost. And so, I'd rather people struggle and get better and get stronger, rather than maybe get lucky and do well in one of the assessments and not learn anything about
Yeah.
what made it go so well.
Can I just, there's another question, Kristen, but thank you, Amy. One of my favorite sessions that you teach, Amy, is the hurricane exercise, where people actually do, it's experiential learning, and people actually assess themselves and see how they actually fail in a task, but that creates huge learning for themselves. So I don't know if we have time, but I think that we have this other question. Maybe we come back to that, or talk a little bit more about hurricane at some point. I just think it's such a great example of doing something and learning from it, and learning from failure, quite frankly, and self-assessing that, wow, I could have done that better to survive a hurricane.
So I'll flag that as something we can come back
Okay.
to.
All right.
Sorry. Yeah.
We did get a question in the chat from Molly. She was asking actually about developmental maturity within of leadership within the Yale framework. So, like, for example, a leader of a team versus of leaders of an organization, complexity increases exponentially as you move up in leadership.
Yes.
So how do you address this? How do you teach? I think Molly, and do chime in if I'm not getting this right, but it sounds like we're asking, how have you dealt with teaching to different, or developing that maturity in a leader, those capabilities in a leader as they take on more responsibility in an organization?
Okay, got it. I think I understand the question, and it's a good one. One way to think about that is, and I appreciate the subtlety of the move that you made, Kristen, in the last part of phrasing the question, because it's one thing to kind of try to slot and assign people, to the right level of offering or course or what have you, depending on how long they've been leading or managing, what's the size and nature of the venture and the role. It's quite another thing to think about, how do we take people from here and bring them to here and help them see that, what enabled them to get to this point in their career and in their leadership, if repeated and sort of done well and even more effectively, is not going to be sufficient to get them effective at the level of, say, moving to organization or whole unit leadership from team leadership, for example. And so we have, I'm going to make sure I'm not using any organization names. We have developed programs that have been targeted to help people who either have been identified for, or perhaps are struggling to reach what the organization is hoping to see as the next level of leadership for them, so that they can be on a much more senior management promotion track, or on a partner track, but where it hasn't happened yet because it's just becoming time to, or it hasn't happened yet because it's past time to, and we need to develop sort of some more skills and vantage points and capabilities in order to do that. And so we do have programs that are developed specifically to kind of move people from here to here. And a lot of the work of those sessions has to do with helping people to identify where it is that their emphasis is in their leadership, where that emphasis is experienced as being by the people that they're leading and working with, and where it has not yet developed, and then really leaning into teaching what does it mean to move to a different way of being responsible for results, or being responsible for carrying through decisions at a level that they've not had to execute in the past. And so we do that through, again, experiential exercises, case studies, really dynamic discussions that we hold in our sessions, and people come out with a very different, I think, set of aims and goals and tools for realizing that what had gotten them to this point is not going to be the thing that gets them to the next stage of their career, and to have a set of priorities and guidance about how it is they ought to be enacting their roles, how it is they ought to be focusing their efforts going forward in the organization.
And so this actually brings up another question we received, or relates to another question that we received about approaching people who need to be developed in a way, like how do you, and maybe it's not so obvious to them, but maybe maybe it is, and like we hope that we all have that level of like self-awareness, but maybe we need to have a tougher conversation about the skills that are needing to be developed. Any advice or guidance on that? Is directness the best policy here?
So it depends, really. I mean, that's sort of the academic answer to everything, for which I apologize. But I mean, it does depend. For people for whom they'll be sort of defensive and stop listening if you're direct, that's not the way. I love this question because I love working with people who are really smart and they're really devoted and dedicated, and they're kind of getting in their own way, and they don't realize the ways in which they're getting in their own way. And so I find the ability to use data, whether that's data from assessments, data from 360 evaluations or feedback that we collect for the leader, or simply, I mean, Lisa mentioned the hurricane exercise, watching yourself on video as you bulldoze a team and lead them down a very unproductive path in ways that we can quantitatively unpack in that exercise, but also qualitatively, you have to see yourself doing that. There are multiple sort of angles from which to come to the point of helping someone recognize, oh my goodness, there's an awful lot of room for growth here. And we do a lot to create an environment where that is normative, whether someone is here to do a lot of growing, even if they're already excellent, but they want to push themselves to sort of further levels, or if the person is perhaps not aware of how many opportunities they have and need to avail themselves of. We take a variety of approaches that make it easier to engage and to feel like it is okay. You're here to learn. It is okay to not be good at certain things or to have real blind spots in your leadership. Getting people sort of open to that is something that I find to be the most fun.
Glad you have fun doing it. Sometimes it might be challenging to have those one-on-one conversations, or even just be able to broach them, to be open to having them, or look at something like what you're discussing. I love that you presented multiple ways into having this conversation. If it is through data or an assessment or recording, there are multiple forms of evidence to provide that might be appealing to different people.
Yes.
So Roman asked in the chat about emotional intelligence. So is this something that our programs teach to? We have multiple programs, Roman, just to be clear, because you asked if it's covered in a specific program. We teach it in many programs, and it is an area of expertise of ours. So Amy, Lisa, could you talk more to that?
I'll take it briefly, but I want to kick it over to Lisa. So yes, Roman, that is an area where we have a number of offerings. We have deep expertise here at Yale. Mark Brackett is here. Emma Sapala is here. These are two of my colleagues who teach a number of different sessions around the topic of emotional intelligence, sessions that introduce the notion, sessions that put it into practice, and sessions that are built to do that at very different levels of leadership, which I think is also quite important, because what emotional intelligence looks like for a new manager is very different from what it would look like for an organization leader. And so that's an area, given the Center for Emotional Intelligence here at the university, our university president, Peter Salovey, who's very much known for his work on emotional intelligence. This is a deep vein of expertise here. But Lisa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I know that you work with lots of clients around bringing this to them.
Yeah, that's a great point, Amy, because I think it's probably the number one mover of clients to us. They'll come and say, boy, we really need to develop the EI in our organization. And unpacking that takes a little while, but I will say, yes, we have a lot of great faculty in that teach in our leadership programs. On that, Mark and Emma are two wonderful faculty members who've come to us from the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence. David Tate is someone who comes with a background in psychiatry from the medical school. We really leveraged talent across the university. We even, David talks about a variety of topics. Emma talks about understanding where you are in the different levels of emotional intelligence. And there are definitely, if you know you're at a certain level, you need to get to another level, you understand what the characteristics are for the next level, you try to work towards that. It's a process. We also, it gets touched on a little bit in our communications area, even persuasion and negotiations and drama. We have a professor who comes and teaches from the drama school, and she is all about helping people understand where the other people are coming from and picking that up, and being able to be in intake mode, which is sorry, you're cringing. You must be cringing at this point, Amy. That's the maybe a lay term for being in intake mode is what you want to be as someone with elevated emotional intelligence. But yes, it's a question that comes up a lot as a goal to build to the next level for any leadership program, and it has the core skills that Amy laid out, at least in those pillars and those levels, well, mostly in that first level, the first step. I don't know if that helps. I hope it does.
Definitely. The other thing I'll say, I know we may have other questions, is one of the things I so appreciate around the teaching that happens here around those topics is, these can be very sensitive things, because you're talking about kind of who are you and how are you showing up as a human in your role and in your professional space. And so I've really appreciated over the years the creative ways in which our colleagues use humor and like a sense of play in those sessions, both as a way to make it safe to talk about and be very real about where people are struggling in that space, but also to make it safe to try new things and to be open to feedback. And, as I had said before, maybe falling short, to normalize that and make it okay, and make it, something that everyone shares in wherever it is that they're starting from. But I'm in awe of the great sensitivity through which our colleagues teach this and get people to really, even sometimes people I think are going to be very reluctant to open up and engage, to get very open and willing to dig in and do the work.
Thank you. You reminded me that some of our other faculty members are teaching some of those skills, the authenticity topic, and even using the Yale Art Gallery to kind of as a metaphor for the importance of authenticity in leadership. And anyway, so Roman, it was a great question. It cut across, I think a lot of our faculty incorporate some of the core skills that are needed for improved EI.
We have another question actually about leadership assessments. So the question is there a leadership assessment from Yale School of Management that we can take a look at on our own, or that we can try out? So what are your responses to that?
So Lisa, that's a question that
I could certainly address it, but Amy, you teach decision making for leaders. I'm not sure if you've ever led a session on reflective best self, but Emma Suppler does.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, both of those. Yeah, and the 360s. Yeah, those are the three main ones.
Yeah. So I'll say a little bit. I'll say a little bit about those. So the last one that Lisa just said, we do have 360-degree feedback tools that we use specifically here at Yale to gather a lot of very helpful foundational information for leaders as they come into the programs, and partner with coaches, partner with teaching and instructional staff with those assessments and data to really again, sort of customize a set of discussions and plans for each leader. The other two sessions that Lisa mentioned are the decision making for leaders sessions. So this is an assessment whereby participants answer 30 different scenarios where the scenarios vary wildly and widely, but in every one of them, you are the leader and you have subordinates and you have to make a decision. And what the assessment does is it looks at how you decide to make that decision. Do you decide yourself? Do you consult individuals in the group? Do you consult the group as a group? Do you facilitate the decision with the group, or do you delegate it to the group entirely? And in the 30 scenarios, we're moving around on you the nature of the situation that you're in, and the level of a number of factors that should normatively move you to be more participative or more directive in how you make that decision. And that is able, that helps us to give really specific data and analysis to people, to help them understand where is their leadership decision-making style really strong and yielding benefits from the point of view of the quality of the decisions they're making and their ability to get those decisions implemented and carried out, and where might they be perhaps falling down, or finding great opportunities for improvement and experimentation. That has been an incredibly powerful assessment for us across a number of different industry spaces with leaders. And then the other one that Lisa mentioned, I'll just say even more briefly, the reflected best self exercise is an exercise that we use here, that I started teaching here at Yale. I think I started using this exercise here in 2007 or 2008. And it's one of the most powerful leadership development assessments I think I've ever used. It's the one I hear the most about from people who've been through our programs, sometimes years later, because it so shaped their path and their understanding of who they could be at their best as a leader. So this is an exercise that pulls on stories and instances that other people offer to that leader of times where they saw that person at their best. And we engage in a deep analytical sort of set of steps with the learner around what it is that they're learning from those patterns and what it might mean for the kinds of spaces, roles, in areas where they're likely to really shine and be seen as evincing great strength just by being a more authentic version of who they are in that role. And so that's one of the other ones that we use.
This is a follow-up question submitted by one of our listeners. So how can we make sure our employees are not overwhelmed with the large amount of assessments or surveys they get from across an organization? And to piggyback on that, how can we make sure that the employees are not overwhelmed with the information they get back from the assessment, right? Sometimes it's a lot to take in and a lot to process.
Yes. I mean, I'll give a quick take on that. I think that's where the genius of Lisa and the team that she leads matters so much, from the point of view of understanding and knowing how much is enough and how much is too much, right? We don't want to overfill people where they have the sense of drinking from a fire hose. They've gotten lots of potentially evaluative feedback, and are perhaps stuck on just processing it and not able to get to the step of understanding how to use it. So there's great care taken in how the program builds over the course of days or sessions, so that assessment information or experiential assessment information that is coming in real time has an opportunity to be unpacked, analyzed, thought through, and then to be either acted upon or to have strategies created for acting upon it. Otherwise, you're getting lots of stuff, but you're not going to be able to leverage it on the other side. And so that's something that we really take great care with, because we want the teaching to have impact, and the impact shows up when people are back in their organizations.
And is there any advice to give around the former part of that question, the question about how there might be a large amount of assessments from across an organization?
Yeah.
Is there any advice about mitigating the amount of assessments that might be given to employees?
Yeah, I mean, on that question, sort of talking in-house in an organization that is using these kinds of things, I do think that my advice would be, and maybe this is practical, maybe it's not, that there needs to be kind of a clearinghouse for that, that once you start to get to a level where people are just being pinged all the time from different departments and levels with this dashboard and with this, kind of survey, what starts to happen is the data gets really bad really fast because people start speeding through it. They stop responding, response rates go down. Decreased response rates lead people to, you're just hearing from the tails, people who love the tool or who hate the tool or who love what you're asking about and they're happy with it or they're not. So you're not getting a true read of the organization. I think then more systematic organization of what are we using, kind of who has decision rights to send a thing out. I hate to add layers and bureaucracy to an organization, but if more is going to be, if less is more, or more, sort of scheduled, queued up, and so on is better, that's going to yield better insights for the organization. So, I think of Google as an example of this. So they have Google Geist, which is an annual survey that they take the entire year to develop, and they carry it out in such a way to get north of 90-95% response rates from across the organization. But that's not by accident. They do it by not overburdening people with data collection, and then also taking the results of that survey every year, and creating actionable sort of changes in the organization that are communicated to everyone, so they realize this is an assessment that's worth their time. This is something that they ought to be responding to. So that's some quick advice and sort of thoughts that may or may not be feasible in your particular organizational homes, but maybe a bit from best practices about how to better lasso that.
Mhm. How do you balance developing individuals with developing groups of individuals within an organization? We talked about individual assessments, surveys, coaching. When is it beneficial to get a group of people and put them into a room with one another and teach them as a group?
I love that question. So, I think some of the most fun teaching I get to do is when we are working at the level of the group, from the point of view of having them go through a set of sessions, again, experiential exercises, discussions, and so on, that enables the faculty to see more clearly, regardless of the individual levels of development or what have you, what are the processual and structural dynamics that are playing themselves out in the team in ways that we can easily intervene with, given, again, sort of what it is that we know and teach about organization structure and organization process, which is going to vary very widely depending on what is the nature of the work of the team. Are these coordination challenges? Are these conflict challenges? Are these decision-making challenges, or any number of, are these questions of dealing with hierarchy and power within the team and tensions around that? That's, I think, where we jump across to thinking about things at the level of the team. And, I think even in programs that are focused at that level, some individual work is helpful, from the point of view of helping people see with, again, individual sessions, or individually targeted sessions at the level of the individual, or perhaps an assessment at the level of the individual, for them to begin to see the bridge or build the bridge between, this is what's happening in the team. It's a team level sort of dynamic, but I see now kind of a role that I'm playing that's either making that better or potentially making that worse. That, I think, is probably the most powerful intersection of learning between those two levels.
Thank you, Amy. I'm going to pass this over to Lisa for the moment. No, I can't hear you.
Okay.
All right. I think we have some mic difficulties for Lisa, and we are at time. So I'm going to wrap this up for us here today. We've had so many wonderful questions, and I do have a few unanswered questions. So I will be sending out an email with a recording of this to all of those who've registered. There will also be some additional information and resources about our programs and about our school, as Amy discussed at the top of the conversation. So you'll have my contact information and Lisa's. So if you want to contact us directly with more questions, by all means, we would love to have a conversation with you. Thank you, Amy and Lisa, so much for your time and your candor. Thank you. And thank you everyone for being on the call today with us. We really appreciate your time. So with that, have a lovely rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thanks all.